The black market auction reeked of sweat and corruption, its dim lanterns casting wavering shadows upon walls stained by centuries of ill intent. Through the winding corridors and cramped hallways, I moved with practiced caution, my heart pounding like a hammer against my chest. The air was thick, tasting faintly of rancid oil and bitter spices, but I had no time to worry about the stench clinging to my leather jacket. My name is Ethan Fane, and I was there on a dangerous mission, to infiltrate the slaver network that had infested the edges of civilized space like a malignant growth, preying upon the innocent and selling them to the highest bidder. For months, I had worked my way into the underbelly of this criminal enterprise, forging alliances, earning the trust of the most notorious dealers by pretending to be one of them. Yet I never imagined the bidding that night would embroil me in a dilemma that would reshape my entire life. I stepped into the central chamber, where a circular platform glowed with a ring of artificial light, illuminating the captives on display. The hush that fell over the room when the curtains parted was broken only by the jarring clank of chains, as a monstrous guard dragged a half-dozen alien prisoners onto the stage. Each had a collar around their neck, some trembling, others glaring with fierce defiance. Rows of hooded figures and wealthy criminals crowded the gallery, bidding with an almost casual cruelty, their eyes gleaming with the thrill of purchasing living beings as if they were little more than exotic trinkets. I swallowed, trying not to let my revulsion show. I had been trained in the delicate arts of espionage, but no training can fully dull the raw horror of witnessing slavery conducted so openly. I forced myself to assume the cold expression I had adopted many times during my infiltration. I was, after all, supposed to be another greedy buyer, feeding the slave market. Still, the churning in my stomach told me that if my ruse failed, I might well end up in chains myself, or at the very least thrown into the black vacuum of space once my true intentions were discovered. My contact, a man with a wiry build, wearing a coat stitched with the emblems of countless galactic houses, sidled up next to me. His name was Lauren, and though I abhorred him, I relied on the information he provided. Lauren whispered in a breath smelling of cheap liquor. "They've got some interesting stock tonight, Ethan. Rare species. Figures you might like a look." I managed a curt nod, trying to keep up my facade. "Lead the way." We passed cage after cage of sorrowful creatures, each more terrifyingly sentient than the last. Some had reptilian scales that shimmered under the dim light. Others possessed extra limbs or pulsing gills. All bore the weight of captivity, despair carved into their features. My heart clenched with pity, but I stayed silent, observing, waiting for the right moment to gather proof, then find a way to take the entire operation down. That was the plan. It had been the plan for months. Until she appeared. She was different from the other captives, alert, sharp-eyed, and unbroken. Her skin glowed with a coppery sheen, her hair a deep cascade of silver that caught the light like strands of moonlight. A single, curving scar crossed her left cheek, but it did nothing to mar her beauty. Instead, it accentuated the defiance that shone in her violet eyes. Chains encircled her wrists, yet she held herself erect, her lips slightly parted, as if challenging anyone to meet her gaze. Lauren tapped my shoulder. "Nyra," he said, voice low and reverent. "Rumor has it she killed 2 of her captors already. Whatever she is, she's dangerous, but the buyers love that. They see her as a challenge." He shrugged. "Some just like breaking the spirited ones." My teeth ground together, and I felt a tremor of anger flit through me. This place was a hive of cruelty, and Nyra was clearly its newest prize. I stared at the bidding panel, at the sudden wave of greed washing over the crowd. Wealthy collectors from far-flung star systems saw her as nothing more than an exotic trophy, a fierce pet to tame. Her glare swept over them with utter contempt. I forced myself to remain calm, to remember my mission. Revealing too much sympathy would blow my cover. Yet there was something magnetic about Nyra's stance, something that made me acutely aware of how close she was to snapping the chains that bound her. She might have been physically tethered, but mentally, she was free, rebellious, and very, very angry. A man on the far side of the chamber raised his bidding rod, calling out a sum that made the crowd gasp. The number soared, higher and higher, as if each bidder sought to prove their own audacity by purchasing this alien woman. My heart pounded. I needed to appear credible, but I had no intention of leaving with a slave. The entire notion was repulsive. All I wanted was evidence. A good reason to call in the authorities to bring this wretched place down in a hail of justice. But how? Then it happened. In the roiling chaos of shouted bids, I took one step forward, just as a pair of enforcers threatened a bystander who was apparently short on funds. Someone jostled me from behind. My arm jerked upward. The bid rod in my right hand, which I'd been carrying for show, flashed its lights, indicating a massive sum. Gasps rose around the room. My face went pale. Somewhere, an auctioneer's mechanical voice rang out. And sold, to the man in the black jacket. Step forward and claim your property. My mind spun. This was not part of the plan. I wavered, expecting someone else to outbid me. But silence fell over the hall, thick as a funeral shroud. Nobody dared top the astronomical figure I had accidentally input. I locked eyes with Nyra, feeling a crawling sense of dread in my gut. Her expression was stoic, her mouth set in a hard line. But beneath that composure, I could sense a flicker of hatred directed at whoever had just claimed her. That unfortunate soul was me. I swallowed, keeping my face neutral for the sake of my cover. Lauren clapped me on the back, a wide grin splitting his features. "You madman," he chuckled, his voice laden with mock admiration. "You must really want her. Don't worry, old friend, we'll get the price sorted out. Let's finalize your ownership, and then, well, have fun taming her. Or should I say, surviving her." Cautiously, I stepped onto the platform, forcing myself to approach Nyra. She stared at me, her gaze unblinking, an unmistakable challenge in her eyes. A heavy set of keys dangled from the belt of the monstrous guard who had dragged her in. He unlocked her cuffs at the auctioneer's instruction, then turned to me with a deep, mocking bow. "She's yours now, sir. We can arrange for transport, or, if you prefer," he leered, revealing crooked teeth, "you can walk her out on a leash." I ground my molars, hating every second of this charade. "I'll handle it," I said quietly. Then, to maintain appearances, I added with a cold smile, "She's mine, after all." Nyra said nothing, but her lip curled in a sneer. For a moment, I worried she might strike me. But she stood perfectly still, her newly freed hands clenching and unclenching at her sides. The tension in the air was palpable. My pulse thundered as I escorted her off the platform, the chains clattering at our heels. Somewhere within that suffocating crowd, as illicit deals continued and new captives were presented, I knew eyes were watching me, suspicious and curious alike. It wouldn't do for me to appear weak or indecisive. I had stumbled into a role, the arrogant buyer who had won the prize. But my mind raced with questions. How would I explain this to my handlers? Could I keep Nyra safe without blowing my cover? And what was she planning? Once we reached a quieter corridor, Nyra snapped her attention to me. Her voice, low and controlled, seethed with anger. "If you think," she said, each syllable dripping with venom, "that I will be your slave, you are sorely mistaken. One more misstep, and I will make you regret it." I exhaled slowly. I didn't intend to. She cut me off, her violet eyes burning into mine. "Spare me your lies. I don't care who you are. I only care about how I'm getting out of here." Before I could respond, Lauren and two additional guards approached. Lauren smirked at Nyra, his hand resting on the hilt of a sidearm. "Enjoying your purchase, Ethan? You made quite a spectacle out there." He fiddled with a small datapad. "The payment is being processed. Gotta hand it to you, that was bold. Now, we've got a transport heading to the nearest outpost. You can either ride with us or take your own vessel. The next auctions are on Carthium Prime in a few days, if you're feeling especially wealthy." His eyes flickered to Nyra. "Or if you need replacement stock." I forced myself to laugh lightly, as though I was completely at ease. "I'll take my ship," I said. "She needs special attention." Nyra's jaw tightened, but she said nothing. Lauren shrugged, clearly uninterested in the details, so long as he got his cut. He handed me a slip of official ownership papers, embossed with a vile insignia of the slavers. "Congrats again," he drawled. Then, lowering his voice so only I could hear, he added, "Word is, this one's special. I'd keep an eye on her if I were you." I tucked the papers away, my stomach twisting at the thought of them. "I'll manage," I said. As Lauren and his goons withdrew, Nyra stared at me with an intensity that made the hairs on my arms stand up. "What's your game?" she asked in that same, measured tone. "I can sense your unease." You're no slaver. I glanced up and down the corridor. Not here, I whispered. Too many years. Just trust me for a moment, please. Her eyes narrowed. The corners of her lips tightened with distrust. But she nodded, albeit reluctantly. And so, I led her deeper into the labyrinthine station, heading for the docking bay, where my starship waited. My mind churned with conflicting priorities. I had to maintain my cover, deliver the intel to the authorities, avoid being discovered, and now I had to safeguard this defiant alien woman I had effectively purchased. My mission had taken a sudden, perilous turn. We reached my ship without incident, though I felt the press of suspicious glances from station security. Boarding the vessel, a battered but sturdy corvette class I called the Radiant Dawn, I guided Nyra to the cargo hold, turned on the lights, and locked the hatch behind us. She immediately stepped back, her posture coiled like a spring ready to uncoil in violence. "All right," she said, voice sharp. "Now that we're away from prying eyes, explain yourself." I rubbed a hand over my face. "My name is Ethan Fain," I began, keeping my voice low and steady. "I'm not a slaver. I'm undercover, working to infiltrate and dismantle the group that took you captive. The last thing I wanted was to buy someone. This was an accident, but I had to go through with it to maintain my cover." She studied me, her eyes flicking to the insignia patch on my jacket that marked me as one of the Slaver Network's official traders. "Why should I believe you?" she demanded. "Men who trade in flesh are known liars." I suppressed a sigh, pulling out a small hollow device. With a press of a button, I displayed credentials from the private intelligence task force that had employed me. I angled the glowing projection toward her, letting her read the details, my mission logs, encrypted commands, the seal of the authorities we were cooperating with. Nyra's face remained guarded, but I saw a flicker of realization in her eyes. She recognized the insignia of the legitimate Galactic Alliance. Her posture shifted slightly, though the tension remained. "If this is a trick," she warned, "I will make sure you suffer." I locked the hatch from the inside, ensuring no one could enter unnoticed. "I have no desire to trick you," I said softly. "But if I'm to protect my cover, I have to act like you're my property." The word tasted foul on my tongue, at least in public. "The moment I can complete my mission, I'll get you to safety." She stared at me, weighing my words in silence. Finally, she exhaled through her nose. "Fine. But know this, I need no savior. If anything, you've complicated my escape." I was about to break out on my own. I arched an eyebrow. "I don't doubt your capabilities," I said, "though I imagine the station's security system might have complicated things." Nyra allowed a faint smirk to tug at the corner of her lips, a glint of confidence lighting her eyes. "I've faced worse." Then she glanced around the cargo hold. "So this is your ship?" "Yeah. It's not much to look at, but she's faster than she seems." I pursed my lips. "Listen, we don't have a lot of time. The slavers are expecting me to appear at the next auction. That's where the network's higher-ups will be. If I can't show up with you in tow, my credibility is blown. But if I do, we can get close enough to gather the final intel we need to shut them down for good." Nyra's eyes narrowed again. "You want me to remain your captive until then?" Heat rose to my cheeks. "Only in appearances," I said quickly. "I'd never force you to do anything. If you have a better plan, I'm willing to listen. But if I drop my cover now, there are hundreds, maybe thousands, of other captives who won't be saved." Silence stretched between us. Outside, the hum of the station's docking bay reverberated through the hall. Nyra crossed her arms, her silvery hair shifting softly as she turned her head. "I hate this," she admitted, a flash of raw emotion breaking through her stern demeanor. "I hate the collar, the chains, the brand of slavery, even if it's for show." She closed her eyes briefly. "But if you truly aim to destroy the ones behind this, perhaps I can endure a short time longer." Relief flooded me. "Thank you," I said softly. "I promise, as soon as we have what we need, I'll get you out of there." She nodded, looking tired but resolute. "I can handle myself." "I don't doubt it," I replied with a small, wry smile. "Now, let's get out of this wretched station before someone decides to question the new transaction." I took the pilot's seat in the cockpit. Nyra settled beside me, her posture stiff, ready to spring into action at the slightest hint of danger. The engines hummed to life with a comforting vibration beneath our feet. I guided the Radiant Dawn through the docking protocols. The atmosphere shields parted, revealing a massive swirl of distant nebulae twinkling like spilled stardust. As we pulled away from the slaver outpost, I allowed myself a single, shaky exhale of relief. Though the night's events had taken an unexpected turn, we were not out of the storm yet. We were heading straight into a new tempest, and Nyra's presence at my side was a constant reminder of how delicate the balance between trust and enmity could be. During our first day in transit, tension hung between Nyra and me like a thick haze. We tried to maintain a sense of normalcy, but there was little normal about our situation. Sometimes I would catch her pacing the corridors of the ship, fingers tracing the walls, eyes narrowing as she inspected every nook and cranny. At first, I thought she was looking for a way to sabotage the vessel and escape. Part of me couldn't blame her if she tried, but I soon realized she was simply restless, a predator in a cage, no matter how well-intentioned her current captor was. I tried to give her space, but we eventually had to talk. In the ship's modest galley, we faced each other across a narrow table where 2 bowls of lukewarm stew steamed quietly. My appetite was minimal, overshadowed by the swirling doubts in my head. "Where are you from?" I ventured. "If you don't mind me asking." Nyra stared at the stew, as though it were some alien concoction, despite the fact she was the alien here, technically. "Your question is a broad one," she replied. "I've traveled across many systems. My people once thrived on the planet Elysiria, but we were scattered after the Great Wars. I grew up on ships, drifting wherever fate took us." I nodded thoughtfully, trying to imagine living such a life. "I grew up in a place called New Boston on the frontier. Not as glamorous as it sounds." She tilted her head. "It doesn't sound glamorous." I snorted, surprising myself with a half-laugh. "Right? It wasn't." My gaze drifted down to my untouched food. "Look, I know none of this is ideal. But if we can pull this off, we can save countless lives." Her violet eyes flicked to me. "I hope for your sake you're telling the truth. If I find out otherwise, well, you won't enjoy the consequences." "That's fair." I hesitated, then reached across the table, retrieving a small device from my pocket. "I want you to have this communicator," I said, setting it before her. "It's coded to the emergency frequency of my allies. If anything happens to me, or if you find yourself in danger, you can call for help." Nyra studied the device, brow furrowing. Then, cautiously, she picked it up. "Why trust me with this? I could contact them now and sabotage your plan." I shrugged. "You could, but from what I've seen, you're not the type to betray someone without cause. Besides, I want you to feel, not trapped. You might not be free in the eyes of the galaxy, but between us, you're not my prisoner." An unreadable expression crossed her face. She pocketed the device and nodded. "Thank you." We ate in silence. Outside the galley windows, the stars stretched by in ribbons of white fire as we drifted through faster-than-light travel. My mind buzzed with the details of the upcoming rendezvous at Carthium Prime, the place where the next auction, an even larger, more ostentatious affair, would take place. If we could pinpoint the slaver leadership there, everything might come crashing down like a dying sun. Still, I couldn't help but feel a tremor of anxiety. I'd plunged myself into a labyrinth of powerful criminals who thought I was one of their own. One misstep, and I'd be done for. More importantly, I might endanger Nyra again. Late on the second day of our journey, as I ran diagnostics on the ship's navigation console, Nyra appeared behind me. I caught her reflection in the flickering screen, arms folded, gaze intense. Something told me she had a purpose in approaching me this time. "What's on your mind?" I asked, my voice quiet amidst the humming of the engine. She leaned on the back of the pilot's chair. "I've been thinking about the next auction. You'll have to present me as a captive again. Do you have any plan for how that will work?" I swallowed. "We'll dock discreetly. There's a private lounge where the highest bidders gather, and that's usually where negotiations go down for the rarer slaves. If we can slip a tracking device onto certain key figures, we can gather intel on their major operations. Once we have enough evidence, our task force will storm the facility." I paused, meeting her gaze in the reflection. "At least, that's the plan. If all goes well, you'll be free, and so will everyone else." Nyra nodded, though her expression remained guarded. "These slavers are cunning. They'll be watching you closely, and me even more closely, given my reputation." "You mean having killed 2 of them?" I said, a faint wryness in my tone. Her lips twisted. "They deserved worse." An uneasy laugh escaped me. No doubt. We lapsed into an uneasy silence, both of us dwelling on the moral weight of our scheme. Finally, Nyra breathed out, almost a sigh. Have you done this kind of infiltration before? Yes, I admitted. But not on this scale. I've gone undercover to bust arms dealers, narcotics rings. I've posed as a mercenary, a smuggler, once even as an aristocrat to infiltrate a high society drug operation. But this, my jaw clenched. This is different. Slavery is vile. There's something deeply personal about taking someone's freedom away. It churns my stomach every time I have to pretend I'm part of it. She studied me for a moment. Then let's make sure it ends. I nodded. Agreed. Carthium Prime was an ugly planet, its atmosphere tainted by centuries of mining and industrial waste. The sky glowed an oppressive orange, and the ground was a patchwork of rust and debris. When we landed, the radiant dawn shuddered as if protesting the environment. Through the cockpit window, I saw the spires of a once grand city, now half sunken into sinkholes created by rampant resource extraction. This was the perfect place for scoundrels and slavers to run their empire. As soon as we docked, I keyed in a series of codes to alert my contact and the local authorities that I was on site, while also maintaining the secrecy of my infiltration. The docking bay was patrolled by armed guards wearing the insignia of various criminal syndicates. They barely gave me a second glance, trusting the forged credentials in my possession. But they sure as hell eyed Nyra, their gazes lingering on her slender figure, her coppery skin, and silver hair. The hostility in their stares was clear. I had forced myself to attach a false collar around her neck, made of lightweight alloy with a hidden clasp she could remove in seconds. Even so, the sight of it filled me with silent fury. To them, she was just another item to be possessed. Nyra marched beside me with cold dignity, refusing to lower her head or feign docility. Part of me feared this would arouse suspicion, but the slavers apparently thought I liked my property strong-willed, a notion that made my skin crawl. The grand hall for the auction was located in a converted palace, once the seat of power on Carthium Prime. Now, its marble pillars and gold inlays served as mere trappings for the wretched trade that took place inside. My senses were assaulted by the same stench of desperation, sweat, and narcotic fumes that I had encountered at the previous auction. The dull roar of the crowd reverberated off the high ceilings, while unseen ventilation shafts blew stale, recycled air across our faces. A guard approached me, scanning my credentials. He was a towering brute with a face full of cybernetic implants that glowed faintly. Name, he rumbled. Ethan Fane. I replied in my best gruff tone. He checked a list on a holopad, then nodded. You're cleared. Is this the Nyra we've heard about? My heart thumped, but I kept my composure. Yes. Made quite the impression at the last venue. Figured I'd show her off. I forced a sly grin, detesting every syllable. Might even consider selling if the price is right. Nyra's nostrils flared, but she stayed silent. The guard chuckled darkly, stepping aside to let us pass. We stepped into the main hall, which was filled with a swirl of exotic beings, well-dressed criminals, and potential buyers. All around, display cases and cages showcased a menagerie of prisoners. Music played softly, punctuated by the cries of the unfortunate. My gut twisted. I scanned the crowd, searching for known slaver bosses, particularly the ringleader, a figure so elusive that we only knew him by a code name, Varaxis. For the next hour, I mingled, letting the scum of the galaxy greet me with fake camaraderie. They asked about Nyra, and I spun a tale about her ferocity, her cunning. I laughed at jokes I wanted to condemn and drank a bitter liquor that tasted of acid. Meanwhile, I discreetly slipped tracking devices into pockets and purses, hoping to trace these monsters back to their lairs. Nyra stayed close, silent, and watchful. Every so often, I felt her lean in, as though to remind me that she was playing along for now, but that her patience had limits. Eventually, I caught sight of Lauren, the man who had helped me with the purchase. He waved me over to a secluded alcove, a smug grin plastered on his face. "Ethan, you old devil," he said, swirling a goblet of some lavender-colored wine. "I see you haven't tamed her yet." He gestured to Nyra. I feigned a casual shrug, forcing a small laugh. "I prefer her this way. Keeps things interesting." Nyra shot me a glare, but stayed silent. Lauren gave a knowing smirk. "Well, if you're looking for more merchandise, There's a special demonstration happening in the lower halls tonight. Some real exotic stock, I hear. I could get you a preview. For a price, of course. My stomach churned. I might take you up on that. But first, I'm hoping to meet some of the higher-ups. I've heard talk of a grand expansion. If there's a chance to invest, I want in. Lauren's eyes flickered with greed. Maybe I can arrange something. Varaxis himself might be here, though he's always shrouded in secrecy. Rumor says even his lieutenants have never seen his face. He shrugged. Still, credits talk. My pulse quickened. So Varaxis was here, in the same building. If I could plant a tracker on him, or someone in his immediate circle, this entire operation could be brought down. Consider me interested, I said evenly. Name your price. We negotiated under hushed voices, while Nyra stood rigid at my side, her collar glinting under the chandeliers. My mind buzzed with adrenaline. This was the break I needed. The plan was falling into place. Or so I thought. That night, under the guise of searching for new acquisitions, I slipped away from the main auction hall, heading down narrow staircases into the bowels of the palace-turned-slaver den. Nyra followed a step behind me, her every movement full of coiled intensity. She had insisted on accompanying me. Trust between us was tenuous but growing. She wanted to see for herself if I would uphold my end of the deal, or if I'd betray her when I got what I needed. The corridors were poorly lit. Flickering torches and sconces alternated with sputtering neon bulbs, creating a jarring dance of shadows along damp walls. At certain corners, we passed captive pens, the moans of prisoners drifting out like echoes of the damned. I steeled myself, reminding myself that soon, if all went according to plan, the authorities would sweep in and free them. We arrived at a heavy door guarded by two towering enforcers. One scowled. Password. Nightfall. I replied, recalling the code Lauren had whispered to me. They stepped aside, allowing us entry into a small antechamber that smelled of old incense and rotting wood. Beyond, muffled voices could be heard, along with the distant scrape of metal on stone. My heart hammered as I realized I was entering a place few outsiders ever saw, and even fewer left alive. Inside, about a dozen slavers and potential buyers milled around, eyeing a small stage in the center of the room. For terrified captives, 3 alien, 1 human, knelt in ragged clothes. Their eyes were full of dread, their wrists bound behind their backs. I forced myself to keep my expression neutral, to pretend this was normal. My stomach twisted in knots. A short, obese slaver with intricate tattoos waddled forward, offering a toothy smile. Welcome, friend. Looking to expand your collection? I nodded curtly, motioning to Nyra. Always open to new possibilities. The words tasted like ash. The man's beady eyes settled on Nyra's collar, and he chuckled. I see you favor the exotic. Yes, we have rare finds here indeed. At that moment, I felt Nyra's hand brush against my arm. Whether intentionally or as a subconscious recoil, I couldn't tell. But the tension rolling off her was palpable. The slaves on the platform shook, tears glistening on their cheeks. I swallowed hard, silently cursing the vile spectacle before me. Actually, I ventured. I hear there's a big deal going down. Something that might catch Varaxis's attention. The man frowned slightly, then forced another oily smile. Varaxis. Oh, I wouldn't know about that, friend. We don't speak of him lightly here. He gestured to the stage. Why not pick a new addition instead? A fighter, perhaps, to accompany this lovely specimen. I began to answer, but froze when the door behind us opened once more. A figure entered, followed by 2 guards. He wore a long, hooded cloak, the cowl pulled low over his face, but the authority radiating from him was unmistakable. Conversations hushed. People parted, as though a wave of dread had washed across the room. I knew at once, Varaxis had arrived. He moved with slow deliberation, the guards flanking him. Without preamble, he strode to the side of the stage, where the bound captives cowered. One of the enforcers yanked the first captive to her feet, a slender woman of a feline-like species. The hooded figure placed a gloved hand beneath her chin, tilting her head up as though inspecting a piece of fruit at a market. My blood boiled. Varaxis's voice emerged from beneath the hood, low and distorted by some device. Acceptable, he said. Then, as if she were no more than a piece of property, he let her drop to the floor. He turned, facing the gathered slavers and bidders. Tonight, I have come to ensure that all who participate in this trade adhere to certain standards. Those who fail will suffer consequences. Goosebumps prickled my skin at the coldness in his tone. This was the man who orchestrated a galaxy-wide network of human and alien trafficking. A man so careful that few had ever seen him in person. Now he stood only yards away. The moment was surreal and terrifying. I felt for the small tracker hidden in my sleeve. If I could slip it onto his cloak or person, everything might change. The authorities, waiting in orbit, would finally have their lead. But how? He was guarded, and any suspicious move could end with me and Nyra dead on the floor. Suddenly, Varaxis turned his hooded head in our direction. "You there?" he said, his voice echoing with mechanical distortion. "Ethan Fane, is it?" Shock jolted me. How did he know my name? Maintaining composure, I inclined my head. "Yes, my lord," I replied, feigning respect I certainly didn't feel. "I'm honored to see you in person. I understand you acquired a rather notorious captive recently," he went on, his gloved hand gesturing toward Nyra. "Nyra of Elysiria, who has killed 2 of our associates." Nyra's posture stiffened. I forced a smile. "Yes, quite the challenge. But I've found her rewarding." Varaxis approached. The entire room seemed to hold its breath. He circled us, his cloak rustling softly on the floor. One of his guards drew a weapon as if anticipating trouble. My heart thudded painfully. This was too close. If he suspected anything. "I wonder," he mused, "if you truly control her. She seems unruly." Nyra's lips parted in a silent snarl. I quickly intervened. "She's learning her place, my lord. In time, she'll serve as a prime example of how we can tame even the wildest creatures." Varaxis let out a low chuckle, the sound warped by his vocal modulator. "Then show me." My breath caught. "Pardon." He stepped back, motioning to the stage where the 4 captives still knelt in misery. "Show me that you can command your slave. Have her punish one of these worthless wretches." His voice dropped to a menacing hiss. "Or perhaps you're not as in control as you claim." Horror washed through me. He was testing me. If I refused, my cover would be blown. If I complied, I would be forcing Nyra to enact violence on an innocent. I felt Nyra tense beside me, a storm of rage pulsing from her. My mind raced for a way out. Varaxis's guard grabbed one of the captives, a trembling human man no older than 20. He hauled the captive forward, pushing him onto his hands and knees. "Go on," Varaxis commanded. "I want to see your prized pet in action." I swallowed. My hand brushed Nyra's arm, a silent attempt to convey that I'd find a way to fix this. Her eyes met mine, furious and betrayed. Then she stepped forward, approaching the terrified young man. My blood pounded in my ears. I knew Nyra would never harm him, but any sign of compassion would condemn us both. Nyra knelt slowly, placing her hands on the captive's shoulders. "Forgive me," she whispered. In one swift motion, she struck the floor beside him, a blow that cracked the stone tile inches from his ribs. The captive flinched, letting out a yelp of fear, but remained unharmed. It was all for show, a feigned act of brutality that ended only in shattered tile. She rose and glared at Varaxis, her lip curled. Silence enveloped the room. Varaxis tilted his hooded head, studying her. I braced myself, expecting an order to kill us both. Then, he laughed, a hollow, menacing sound. "Interesting," he said, stepping back. "I see your slave prefers to make a statement rather than follow commands precisely. Be cautious, Ethan Fane. Perhaps you're not as in control as you wish to appear." Relief mingled with dread in my chest. He was letting us go for now. I nodded, doing my best to feign confidence. "I'll keep your advice in mind." With a dismissive wave, Varaxis and his guard turned away. The entire room seemed to exhale collectively. My palm was slick with sweat around the hidden tracker. I hadn't had the chance to plant it. Our window of opportunity had closed all too quickly. Still, we were alive. Nyra returned to my side, her jaw set, fury blazing in her eyes. "Never again," she whispered, voice trembling. "Never again." I gave the barest nod, leading her away from the stage, ignoring the muttered remarks of onlookers. My mind was a whirl of frantic thoughts. We had come so close, only for Varaxis to slip away again. If we couldn't track him, all of this was for nothing. And the next time we encountered him, we might not be so fortunate. We retreated to a secluded corner of the palace halls, a half-collapsed balcony overlooking the toxic, orange-hued city. Wisps of acrid smoke rose in the distance, where factories spewed foul fumes into the atmosphere. Nyra rounded on me, fists clenched, voice taut with fury. You wanted me to whip him? Or brand him? Are we just going to pretend that was all right? I raised my hands defensively. I didn't want that. I was stalling. You handled it brilliantly, but I'm sorry you had to do anything at all. Her eyes flashed. This can't go on, Ethan. That boy. He looked at me like I was some monster. She pressed her lips into a thin line, fighting back what might have been tears of frustration. I won't torture innocent people so you can maintain your cover. My head bowed. I know. I'll figure out a way to bring this to an end soon. I glanced around, paranoid that hidden cameras or microphones might be tracking our every word. Varaxis is here. If we can just corner him or one of his lieutenants, plant the device, the authorities can swoop in. Maybe we can do it tonight, before the demonstration ends. Nyra didn't look convinced, but she nodded, determined to see this through. I was about to suggest a plan when I noticed movement at the far end of the balcony. Someone was approaching, stepping carefully over the cracked floor tiles. I tensed, my hand drifting toward my concealed sidearm. A tall, lithe figure emerged from the shadows, a woman dressed in sleek black attire, with a veil covering the lower half of her face. Her hair was braided tightly against her scalp, silver rings piercing her ears. She raised her hands in a non-threatening gesture. Peace, she whispered. I come as a friend. Nyra and I exchanged a glance. The newcomer looked every bit the rogue agent, someone who navigated these circles with lethal grace. Who are you? I asked, my tone guarded. The woman pulled down her veil, revealing stern features. My name is Samala. I'm an informant for the same intelligence network you serve, she said, looking pointedly at me. I've been undercover here for years, sending data on Varaxis's operations. I know who you are, Ethan Fain, and I've been waiting for you to make your move. My pulse jumped. Why reveal yourself now? She glanced over her shoulder, as though expecting to be followed. You're in danger. Varaxis suspects you're not what you appear. He's letting you remain to see if you lead him to other infiltrators. He's using you as bait. And you. She turned her focus to Nyra. They're keeping a close eye on you because of your history. If you don't act fast, they'll pin you both with enough evidence to have you executed. Nyra's expression shifted to a sort of grim acceptance. Tell us something we don't know. We've almost been caught once tonight already. Samala nodded. There's a private vault deeper within the palace where Varaxis hides his records. If you can get inside, you'll find details on all the shipments, the routes, and even his real identity. She lowered her voice. Once we have that, the authorities can strike. But time is short. He plans to leave Carthium Prime at dawn. I considered her words, feeling the weight of them settle over me. You're certain about this vault? She tapped a small device on her wrist, projecting a partial blueprint of the palace. It's here, but it's heavily guarded, with biometric locks. Nyra crossed her arms. We can handle guards, she said, a hint of fierce conviction in her voice. Samala met her gaze. It's not just guards. There's rumored to be a lethal security system, coded to Varaxis's genetic signature. Even if you get past the enforcers, the system will kill you if it doesn't detect the right DNA. My heart sank. So, we'd need Varaxis himself to open the vault? A small, sardonic smile tugged at Samala's lips. Either him, or a bit of him. Blood, hair, whatever can fool the scanner. Nyra made a soft sound of disdain. So, we'd have to confront him directly? Samala nodded. Yes, or one of his closest lieutenants who might have override codes. But from what I've seen, Varaxis doesn't share power. I took a steadying breath. This was madness. But if we managed it, we could end this entire operation. We'll do it, I said, my voice firm. We'll find a way. Samala's eyes flicked between Nyra and me, weighing the resolve she saw there. She gave a tight nod. I'll be watching your backs as best I can. Meet me outside the vault in an hour. With that, she raised her veil again and slipped away, disappearing back into the gloom. Nyra exhaled, her anger momentarily displaced by a sharp focus. We're going after him, aren't we? I nodded. It might be our only chance. You don't have to come if you don't want. She cut me off. I'm coming. If it means freeing the slaves and stopping this evil, I'll do whatever it takes. Gratitude coursed through me. Then let's prepare. We quickly formed a plan. I'd locate Varaxis and distract him long enough for Nyra to obtain a sample of his DNA, hair, blood, anything. Samala would be waiting near the vault. Once we gained entry, we'd upload the data to the waiting ships above. With evidence in hand, the Allied forces could launch their raid. It was fraught with risks, but we had no other choice. Sneaking back into the restricted areas wasn't difficult, thanks to Samala's instructions. Avoiding suspicion, however, was another matter. We passed rows of heavily armored guards, using false credentials and the occasional bluff. The labyrinth of corridors felt endless, and every footstep echoed ominously. My nerves were frayed by the time we reached a chamber with an elaborate, gilded door guarded by 2 silent sentinels. Beyond, music drifted softly. A private party? Or some twisted spectacle? I turned to Nyra. "Wait here until I signal," I whispered, then create a distraction. She arched an eyebrow. "Be careful." I nodded, stepping forward with as much confidence as I could muster. The guards crossed their weapons, blocking the door. "State your business," one intoned. "I'm here to see Varaxis," I said, injecting just the right blend of arrogance into my tone. "I have a proposition he might find valuable." The guards exchanged glances. One spoke into a communicator. A few tense seconds later, the door slid open with a hiss. I was ushered inside, and it shut behind me, sealing Nyra outside. The room was lavishly decorated, with plush couches and shimmering drapes. Crystal chandeliers bathed everything in a soft, golden glow. A wide window overlooked a sprawling courtyard, its artificial lights flickering like trapped fireflies. Varaxis stood near a table laden with exotic dishes, still cloaked, but with the hood lowered enough to reveal a strong jaw and a faint sneer. Beside him was Lauren, looking nervous, and a few other individuals who radiated an air of danger. Varaxis turned as I entered, that same mechanical distortion in his voice. "Ethan Fane, you're persistent, I'll grant you that." I inclined my head. "I have an offer that could expand your reach beyond this sector. My sources tell me there are untapped markets in the Orion Fringe." He studied me, the black lenses of some advanced visor reflecting my tense posture. "And why should I trust you?" "I have connections with wealthy collectors," I lied smoothly. "They're always looking for unique acquisitions." He chuckled. "That might intrigue me. But you've gained a reputation for defiance among some of my associates. They say you let your captive maintain too much freedom, that you hesitate to show dominance." My heart hammered. "I prefer to keep her spirit intact until I break it completely. In my experience, that fetches a higher price." Lauren gave a sly grin, raising his glass in mock salute. The others laughed. I forced myself to join in. Inside, I loathed every moment. Varaxis lifted a goblet, taking a slow sip. "And yet, I saw your reluctance. If you truly want to make a deal, you'll have to prove yourself." Words alone don't impress me. I suppressed the surge of panic. I needed him close, needed a chance to get a DNA sample. Where was Nyra? Any moment now, I hoped, she'd provide a distraction. I dared to glance at a side door. Was that the route she'd take? As if on cue, a distant explosion rattled the palace. Alarms blared. Screams echoed. Varaxis's guards tensed, weapons raised. Lauren spilled his drink, cursing. I heard a rush of booted feet outside, frantic shouting. Varaxis turned sharply, eyes narrowed. "What is the meaning of this?" he hissed. That was my cue. I lunged forward, drawing a concealed blade from my sleeve. In a blur, I seized Varaxis's arm, slashing quickly where glove met skin. He jerked away with a snarl, but I managed a shallow cut, enough to stain the blade with a few drops of blood. Immediately, his guards reacted, leveling their rifles at me. Lauren shouted something unintelligible, diving for cover. I spun, weaving between columns, returning fire with my sidearm. Laser bolts ricocheted off the marble pillars. A guard collapsed with a cry. Varaxis retreated behind an overturned table, pressing a hand to his wounded wrist. His cloak billowed, revealing advanced body armor. This man was prepared for betrayal. "Kill him," Varaxis roared, voice echoing with savage fury. Bullets and plasma scorched the air. I ducked behind a column, my heart thundering in my chest. The entire palace was thrown into chaos. Through the windows, I saw bursts of light, possibly from the authorities who had begun their assault early, or from Nyra's handiwork in the corridors. I checked the blade, verifying I had the blood. Yes, a few droplets gleamed darkly. That was enough. Now, I had to get out of here before they overwhelmed me. My only path was to fight my way to the door or risk leaping through the window. The door was blocked by at least 3 heavily armed guards. The window overlooked a courtyard, not too high a drop, but who knew what lurked below? I didn't hesitate. With a deep breath, I shattered the glass with a quick shot, ignoring the shards that flew past me. Varaxis's men scrambled to stop me, but I vaulted over the ledge, dropping into the courtyard below. The impact jarred my bones, nearly knocking the wind from my lungs, but I rolled to break the fall. Above me, muzzle flashes lit the night. I sprinted, heart hammering, adrenaline screaming in my veins. Nyra found me moments later, emerging from a side passage, panting and disheveled. "Are you insane?" she snapped, grabbing my arm to steady me. I set off a small explosive to distract them, not start a war. Varaxis was in there. I managed between breaths. I got his blood. I showed her the blade. A gleam of triumph lit her eyes, though she quickly refocused. Samala's waiting at the vault. We dashed through burning corridors where the explosion had torn massive holes in the walls. Sirens wailed, and smoke filled the air with a choking bitterness. Guards rushed about in disarray, some heading to quell the fires, others searching for the source of the attack. We slipped past them, using the chaos to our advantage. Finally, we reached the vault's entrance, an imposing metal door etched with arcane symbols, guarded by a heavy-duty security panel. Samala stood crouched behind a fallen column, exchanging fire with 2 armed enforcers. She waved us over, nodding grimly. "Got here just in time," she yelled over the din. Nyra and I flanked her, returning fire. Within seconds, the guards lay unmoving. Samala rushed to the security panel, gesturing for the blade. "Hurry," she hissed. I pressed the blade to a small, tube-like device she carried, which extracted a droplet of Varaxis's blood. She inserted the device into the lock. A tense moment passed. Then the vault's panel beeped green, and the massive door creaked open, revealing a dim chamber beyond, filled with computer terminals and safes. This was it. We entered cautiously. Samala rushed to one of the terminals, typing frantically. "I'll download the files," she said. "Cover me." Nyra and I took defensive positions at the doorway, expecting a swarm of guards at any second. My palms were slick with sweat. This was the heart of the Slaver Empire's operation, the dark nerve center that could topple them if exposed. I pictured Varaxis prowling above, wounded but enraged, rallying his men. Samala muttered curses under her breath. "Firewalls, it's heavily encrypted. I need a minute." Gunfire echoed down the corridor. Another pair of guards charged in, but Nyra intercepted them with a flurry of blows. She moved like quicksilver, spinning and striking. One guard hit the floor unconscious, the other reeled back, clutching a broken arm. I fired my pistol, finishing him off before he could raise his weapon again. Smoke drifted through the open vault door, thick with the stench of burning metal. "Hurry," I yelled to Samala, who responded with a nod, her fingers flying across the console. Suddenly, an alarm shrieked, piercingly loud. Red lights flashed. Self-destruct sequence. I gasped, scanning the walls. It didn't look like it. Then a crackle of static sounded over hidden speakers. Varaxis's distorted voice filled the vault. "You think you can steal from me? You think you can ruin all I've built? I will burn this place before I let you take anything." My stomach lurched. Could he flood the vault with poison gas or detonate charges beneath us? Samala grimaced. "He's attempting to override my download. We have maybe 30 seconds before he locks it down." "I'm almost there." Nyra grabbed a fallen guard's rifle, taking position at the corridor's entrance. "We have company," she cried. A squad of heavily armed slavers advanced, lasers streaking past. We dove behind heavy crates for cover. Lasers sizzled against the vault's metal walls. One crate burst open, spilling gilded trinkets across the floor. I popped up to return fire, forcing the slavers back. The muzzle flashes lit the gloom in stark bursts. My mind raced with the knowledge that we were outnumbered and cornered. Samala needed time, seconds we didn't have. "Got it," Samala shouted suddenly, ripping a data module from the console. A shrill tone blared from the system, indicating an imminent lockout. "We have the records." "That's all we need," I said, exchanging a look with Nyra. "Let's move." We retreated deeper into the vault, searching for an emergency exit or a hidden passage. The corridor ahead was blocked by more slavers, so Nyra fired the rifle in short bursts, driving them back. Samala scanned the walls. "Here," she said, slamming a palm against a hidden panel. A concealed door slid open with a hiss, revealing a dark, narrow tunnel. We ducked inside, the door sealing behind us just as the slavers stormed the vault. Breathing heavily, we made our way through the cramped passage, illuminated only by the flicker of a single emergency lamp Samala carried. I sensed the vibrations of distant explosions, felt the palace shaking. At last, the tunnel angled upwards, depositing us in a dingy alleyway behind the palace. Toxic wind whipped at our clothes, carrying the stench of burning chemicals. A battered transport shuttle hovered nearby, its pilot leaning out the open door. Samala waved to him. "Our getaway," she said, relief washing over her features. We piled in, the pilot taking off the moment the hatch sealed. Above Carthium Prime, chaos reigned. Allied warships had emerged from hyperspace, launching a blitz on known slaver strongholds. Explosions lit the dark vacuum like newborn stars. We soared through the atmosphere, weaving past anti-air fire from surface defenses. Nyra clung to a grab handle, steadying herself as the shuttle rocked. Samala clutched the data module as though it were her lifeline. "This is it," she breathed. "Everything we need to identify Varaxis, track his operations, rescue his captives." I exhaled, the weight of months, years, of infiltration and deception finally lifting from my shoulders. Let's hope it's enough. When we docked with the Allied flagship, a medical team greeted us, along with a detachment of Marines. Nyra looked uneasy stepping into another militarized environment, but I placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. She glanced at me, and for the first time, I saw gratitude. An officer rushed forward, saluting Samala and me. "Excellent work. We're already disabling Varaxis's ships, rounding up his associates. You've saved countless lives." Samala handed over the data module. "Find them all. Leave none of these slaver dens intact." The officer nodded solemnly. "We will." Then he looked at Nyra, the collar still around her neck, though it was obviously fake. "Is she?" Nyra raised her chin defiantly. "I'm nobody's slave." I gently unclasped the false collar, letting it drop to the deck. "She's free," I said softly, an unspoken apology shining in my eyes. She held my gaze for a moment, then turned to the officer. "I want to help. There are others like me, still trapped. My people. We can't leave them behind." The officer nodded. "We'll coordinate rescue efforts. Your insight could be invaluable." Despite the turmoil, a small, genuine smile touched Nyra's lips. It was a sight I hadn't seen before, a quiet joy in the midst of darkness. Over the next few days, the Allied forces dismantled the slaver network's main branches. The data we'd retrieved unveiled hidden routes, secret accounts, and Varaxis's identity, a disgraced noble from a once powerful family. He was captured while attempting to flee Carthium Prime in a cloaked vessel. They found him wounded and furious, cursing my name and swearing revenge. But the authorities locked him away, ensuring he would never again profit from the suffering of others. During that time, Nyra and I stayed aboard the flagship, lending whatever help we could. She worked closely with the rescue teams to reunite freed captives with their families, when possible, and to arrange care and support for those who had no one left. I provided statements to the Intelligence Council, verifying the chain of evidence that would see Varaxis brought to justice. In the aftermath, as the dust settled, I found Nyra alone one evening, standing at a massive observation window. Beyond the reinforced glass, stars glimmered against the endless dark. The flagship hummed quietly, drifting in orbit above a planet that was finally free of slaver rule. "Hey," I said, stepping up beside her. She gave a slight nod, acknowledging my presence. "I'm leaving soon," she said after a pause, voice subdued. "I heard they're sending the freed Elisirians to a sanctuary planet. I want to be there, to help my people rebuild." I swallowed the sudden pang of emptiness that threatened to gather in my chest. "That's good," I said softly. "They'll be lucky to have you." She turned, violet eyes reflecting the distant starlight. "What about you, Ethan? Are you returning to your life? Another undercover job?" I shrugged, feeling the weight of the question. "I'm not sure. This mission took a toll on me. Maybe I need some time to figure out who I am when I'm not pretending to be someone else." Nyra studied me, a small smile curving her lips. "You're more than a mask," she said, her tone gentler than I'd ever heard it. A comfortable silence fell between us. My heart thumped with conflicting desires. Part of me wanted to join her, to see what a new beginning might look like. But I knew that her path and mine might diverge. She had her people, her heritage, and I had my own. Still, I ventured a tentative offer. "If you ever need help," I said, "you know where to find me." She nodded. "Likewise." Then she hesitated, reaching out to grasp my hand lightly. Her fingers were warm, steady. "Thank you," she murmured. "For buying me. For setting me free. For everything." Emotions swelled in my chest, a mixture of relief and regret. I gently squeezed her hand. "Thank you for trusting me," I said, voice quiet with sincerity. In the days that followed, Nyra departed with a convoy of her people. I stayed behind, tying up loose ends with the Allied forces. Varaxis stood trial, his empire dismantled, and countless victims were set free. The ripple effects of that mission spread across dozens of star systems, weakening other slaver operations and emboldening those who fought against tyranny. Eventually, I returned to my ship, the Radiant Dawn, preparing for my next steps. The cargo hold felt empty without Nyra's presence, her quiet, intense energy. I laid aside the false collar and the forged ownership papers, now just grim reminders of the life we had escaped. As the ship's engines roared to life, I allowed myself a final memory of her smirk, her defiant laugh, the fierce pride in her eyes. Then I charted a course toward a distant horizon. Weeks later, just as I had settled into a solitary routine of small-time missions and cargo runs, I received a priority hail on the secure frequency. My heart jumped. "Ethan," a familiar voice echoed through the communicator. "It's me." "Nyra." Relief and excitement flooded me. "Nyra? Are you all right?" A soft laugh hummed across the channel. "I'm fine, but there's a situation in the Andorra system. My people could use someone with your particular set of skills. Think you can come?" I smiled, powering up the engines. "I'll be there," I promised, feeling the stirrings of hope and a renewed sense of purpose. "Coordinates." She sent them, and I locked onto the signature, my ship's console lighting up with a star map that would guide me to her. The engines thrummed beneath me, eager to traverse the cosmic darkness once again. As I prepared for the jump to faster than light, I let my thoughts wander to the uncharted territory ahead, a future woven with possibilities, alliances, and perhaps more than just fleeting gratitude between two survivors of a broken system. The radiant dawn surged forward, vanishing into the star-flecked void. In that moment, I knew the story wasn't over. Nyra, fierce and unchained, had become more than a chance encounter. She was a beacon of change, and though I had once bought her, the truth was that she had claimed a piece of me in return, my loyalty, my respect, my admiration. Our destinies, it seemed, were bound together, forging a new path in the galaxy where neither of us would ever again be enslaved. And so it was that what began as an unintended purchase in a filthy market of chains ended in a bright promise of collaboration and freedom. An ending, yes, but also the happiest beginning I could ever have hoped for.